The following program may contain coarse language, sexual content, violence, and mature themes, so if you're under 18, back away from the television. Not for you, buddy. Viewer discretion is advised.
200 years ago, back when the world was just learning about space and slowly making waves into the space program, a small child was born in Kaying, China. This baby was born with the uncanny ability to seemingly glow out of nowhere. The main problem for this was that soon ere that moment, many other children across the globe had started gaining abilities that were seemingly supernatural. Within the next 100 years across the world, the meta-abilities that the doctors had come to name as quirks had taken over all of society as they soon made a new profession for the world: heroes. These people would take money in the form of a paycheck as they would do their very best in order to protect the peace of the world. These people would vary from all kinds of looks, from the normal human being who could emit fire, ice, wind, water, and many others, to mutated heroes and heroines who had the appearance similar to that of an animal from the animal kingdom. But with this new profession in the world, came the antithesis of this profession. Villains would pop up in order to fight these so-called heroes as they gained reputation from these kinds of fights. Sometimes a hero would die in the fight, becoming a martyr in making waves for new heroes to come about. Other times the hero would win, most of the time capturing the villain and making sure that they are placed in jail, as well as the occasional killing of a villain. This would produce heroes that killed any villain they deemed as too villainous to stay on the street. Not many heroes do this today, but they were dissimilar in the past to this. This is the story of how I became a hero. An underground hero who was fighting crime without a quirk. A male voice called out, as we appear in the past of the main character's life. In a hospital room we find a green-haired woman who was in labor, as she had been pushing with all her might to get her child out of her stomach and into the world. This woman was Inko Midoriya, and she was in labor with her husband's child. Her husband's name was Hisashi Midoriya, and he was the Midoriya matriarch, as he took care of Inko and her life as the man of the house. He was standing next to Inko as she held onto his hand with a grip that could kill many young children from the force alone. Inko Midoriya had a quirk that was essentially useless to most professions in the world, with it being a minor telekinesis, whilst her husband had a powerful quirk that allowed him to breathe as well as consume fire through his mouth, as he used this ability in order to become a support engineer in America. He was on vacation with his wife when she had been in labor, as they were visiting the hot springs in downtown Musudafu, Japan. Within 15 hours a baby boy was born on the 15th of July in 2XX, as Inko and Hisashi looked at their child, who bore the messy hairstyle of Hisashi and had a mix of their hair colors. The baby boy's hair had the roots of black hair, with the outer rim of it being a light forest green. When the baby opened his eyes for the first time, he looked at his mother with beautiful emerald green eyes. They were big and expressive as he looked around his surroundings. Inko looked at her husband as he stared back at her. This was their child, and they would make sure that they dedicate their lives to making sure that he was a good child growing up. His name shall be Izuku Midoriya, and he will be capable of achieving his dreams in the future when he becomes old enough to do exactly that. Hisashi said, as he stared at Inko. Green hero really? Inko asked, giggling. I don't see you coming up with Any kind of names. Hisashi sputtered out, looking away angrily. Do you want to hold him? Inko asked, looking at her husband. The man looked back and held out his hands as he held his baby in his arms. Getting a closer look at his son, he noticed that he had a distinct set of freckles on each cheek of his face in the shape of a diamond. Similar to his son, Hisashi had freckles on his face, but they were more pronounced on his nose and under his eyes than on his cheeks in a diamond shape. He would smile at his son as he took in the scent. His son would have ere just being born, and he looked at Inko as they would begin the next stage of their life now with their son in their lives. Nothing would stop them. Hisashi, you are needed here in the States. We need your expertise as well as your quirk in making sure that these buildings are built without fail. Hisashi's boss from America called out angrily. Sir, I am on my vacation. I just got here not even a few hours ago in Japan. I can't just leave them like this as soon as my wife just gave birth. Hisashi growled out. I don't care if you have a wife and son, I need my best worker. God damn it. His boss slammed his fist on his table on the other side of the line. Hisashi looked at his sleeping wife as he growled angrily on the phone, telegraphing his anger to his boss at the choice being given to him. What will happen if I continue my vacation here in Japan with my family? Hisashi asked, cautiously. You will be fired from your position, and you will be sent back to your home there without any kind of income to keep your family safe. His boss said, as Hisashi growled even more. In his childhood his friends had stated that his growls were similar to dragons in movies as well as stories they had heard from animes they had seen in their past. As Hisashi left the bedroom while his sleeping wife would unknowingly never see her husband ever again. From this moment, Hisashi would leave a note on the counter of his home as he would head out, and make sure that he sends most of the money he gains from America over to them in order to keep them living in this home. He couldn't and wouldn't ever let them become homeless whilst he worked overseas, and he will most definitely never give up on his family. Leaving during the night, he was never seen again from his family, although they would always get calls in the future from him. That next very morning, Inko would wake up to find her husband gone and sigh in defeat. She had heard the sounds of her husband on the phone the previous night, as she knew that he wouldn't ever place his family in danger, and made sure to leave a note telling her about what had happened. She would then hear the crying of her son Izuku as she ran towards his bedroom to find him lying on his back in the crib crying. As she moved over and comforted him. I'm sorry that daddy isn't ever going to be here to watch you grow, but mommy will be there to show you the way. Maybe I can make sure that you can achieve your dreams in the future, Inko said, as she rocked her baby back to sleep. A few weeks would pass by without any sign of Hisashi returning to his home with Inko and Izuku, and it finally set in that Hisashi's job had forced him to leave his family permanently. Inko would cry in her room whenever her baby was sleeping in order to hide the pain of her only other pillar of love gone from her home. She looked over at her sleeping son as she made a silent promise to always and forever love and cherish him, as well as provide him a place to stay no matter the cost. Not only that, but to support him in his dreams for whatever they may be when he grows older, to take care of himself. She could see it now, her Son having a mix of her and Hisashi's quirk, saving people with an honest to God smile on his face. She would make sure that this dream was attainable for Izuku, as she made plans for when he would get the training as well as mental training in order to become strong as well as mentally strong enough to defend himself in the future. She got another job as she made sure to save that money she had gotten in order to place it to his education as well as place it into an account where he could use it himself, should something bad happen to her. It was about 3 years ere the disappearance of Hisashi that Inko would reunite with an old friend, because her 3-year-old son had met a boy with the last name of Bakugo. When she was brought over to this Bakugo's house, she was returned with a familiar face of Mitsuki Bakugo, who was the mother of the little boy of that family. Mitsuki-chan, Inko cried out, happily seeing her old friend again. Inko! Mitsuki called out happily as she pulled the mother into a hug. Little Izuku at the time had no idea what in the world was happening, but was happy that his mother was happy, since she had been crying a lot more recently. He entered the house with his mother as they talked about their childhood, as Izuku listened in with rapt attention. It was here that Mitsuki's son had entered the room and found Izuku listening to his mother's talk with his "Come on, Izu, I want to play heroes," he called out, as he pulled Izuku away. "Don't hurt him too badly, brat," Mitsuki called out, as Bakugo had yelled back at her, calling her a hag. While the mothers had been talking to one another, Izuku and Bakugo were playing heroes with their all-might action figures. They had both learned a love and admiration for the #1 hero of the world as soon as his debut in Japan was seen on the internet. Katsuki Bakugo, Izuku's friend as well as potential best friend in his future, had admired the #1 hero for his tenacity as well as his ability to never lose against an opponent. Izuku, however, had learned to love and admire, but not forgetting about respecting the hero's tenacity, heroism, as well as his general overall heroic actions in saving civilians first before fighting a villain. That video that he had always watched when All Might debuted on the internet had him saving hundreds of people within Tokyo, all within an hour. He had saved hundreds of people with no signs of stopping. Izuku was playing with Katsuki as he had learned from the boy that he had already gotten his quirk really early, with it being similar to sparklers for fireworks as of right now. But in the future, Izuku predicted that the boy would be capable of making explosions that would rival the power of All Might alone in Katsuki's prime. But as of right now, he was focusing on playing with his friend and keeping up with the boy in terms of training as well as brain power. In their school, Izuku was smarter than Katsuki, but since he didn't show any signs of gaining a quirk yet, his grades were lowered to be just under Katsuki in terms of when he will present his quirk. But sadly, as most good things, they come to an end, as 2 years later, without having a quirk manifest within his body, Izuku was taken to the doctor to see what was happening. Entering the hospital, they entered the room to wait for the doctor to run some tests in order to make sure that Izuku had a quirk. It would be exactly 3 hours later ere thorough tests, Izuku's doctor would return to the room with some paperwork. "You should probably just give up," the doctor said, bluntly telling Izuku to give up on his dream. What are you talking about?" Dr. Inko asked. "Well, based on our research on your son, he doesn't even have a quirk factor as well, as the bones in his body show clearly that he is quirkless. The doctor said, pulling out a piece of paper showing an image of her son's foot. You see in this picture of your son's foot, in the pinky toe you can clearly see two joints in the bone itself. It was proven in scientific studies that if you have that second joint in the pinky toe, you don't have a quirk, and so long as it doesn't manifest at the age of 4, he will not develop a quirk. I'm sorry to say that he will never gain a quirk in his future. I am telling your son to give up on his dreams of heroism before it's too late. The doctor said, walking away from the room to let them process the results. As they left the hospital that day, nobody would ever like Izuku again. The only one who even cared for him was his mother, since he never met his father. Izuku would go to his bedroom that night, as Inko prepared for their dinner, as he would watch the video of All Might's debut. And Inko had arrived at his bedroom door that night in order to call her son for eating their dinner when she saw a light coming from his room. Opening the door, she found a very familiar video playing in the background as Izuku turned around as he spoke. You see that, Mom? There is always a smile on his face. No matter how bad things get, even when things seem impossible, he never gives up. Do you think that I can become a hero too? Izuku asked, crying. Inko would walk over to her son as she looked him in the eyes as she kneeled down to him to let him see the actual tears in her eyes. She knew that if she never answered him now, he probably never would forgive her, so she made her decision. Izuku, you know that I love you, right? Inko asked, as her son nodded his head. Well, no matter what decision you make, whether you decide to become a vigilante, villain, or even a hero, I will always and forever make sure that you attain your dreams. That is the promise that I made as soon as you were born. I will not allow you to give up on your dreams all because of a diagnosis. I will make sure that you are trained mentally as well as physically in order to become the world's first, and best, quirkless hero. Inko said, as she let out her tears as her son cried with her hugging her. They would spend the most of their night crying in the other's arms as Izuku would cry on her shoulder, thanking her for allowing him to pursue his dream. The next day that Izuku saw his friend, he found him in the park with his other friends as they were waiting for his arrival. Running to meet his best friend, the boy turned around as soon as he heard Izuku's feet stomping on the ground to catch up to him. Hey Izu, what's going on? Why did your hag call you to the hospital 2 days ago? Katsuki asked, looking at Izuku. I went to the quirk doctor 2 days ago, Kiken, Izuku said, as he stared at his best friend. If anyone were to tell you that, Izuku thought that Katsuki would never stray from him in his future, Izuku would believe you without any hesitation. All they made a promise to become heroes together in the future. Well, what happened? Katsuki yelled as he waited for Izuku's diagnosis. The doctor told me that I was quirkless, Izuku said, as Katsuki stared at him with shock. As Izuku was about to tell him about his dreams as a hero, Katsuki then growled at him. So, you are as useless as most of these extras around here? Bullshit. There is no way you are quirkless. Katsuki screamed at Izuku, causing the poor boy to flinch from the intensity. Keikaken, where are you going? Izuku called out, as Katsuki looked back at him. I will never be friends with a quirkless loser like you. Katsuki screamed as he ran away from Izuku. It wouldn't take long before his quirklessness would spread around the school of Aldera Primary School. Everyone soon learned that Izuku was born quirkless, and everyone showed looks of pity, as well as disgust at him as he walked around the school. That would be what would happen throughout the rest of his school year as he continued his studies there. But not even 3 weeks ere his diagnosis, Izuku would be walking home ere a very bad day at school where everyone was calling him useless as well as worthless. He found himself near a park looking over. He found a young boy holding his arm as Katsuki and his friends lorded over the boy as they looked like villains. Izuku, being the caring boy he was, ran over to assist the boy on the ground as he stood in front of Katsuki. Stop this Keikakin. He's already hurt. You don't need to continue like this. Izuku called out, trembling. Well, if it isn't the quirkless loser. Get out of here. Or else you would get what he gotten 10 times worse. Katsuki threatened. What did he even do? Izuku asked, calmly. If he can find out what happened, then he might be able to escape this without being beaten down by Katsuki. This bastard was talking about how his quirk was better than mine. I just came over here and just so happened to hear him talking about it like I wasn't in charge of this area. I just showed that worthless extra his place. Katsuki boasted, as Izuku stared at him in shock. Keikakin, that is just mean. He was just stating something that he thought was true. He already lost against you, just leave him alone. Izuku said, trying to calm the blonde down. It was soon ere that Katsuki moved closer with his explosions sparking around his hands as Izuku was forced to slowly back away in fear. You know, with how you're quirkless, your name could be read in a different way. Katsuki said, ominously. What are you talking about? Izuku asked, concerned. Well, if you combine defenseless and Izuku together, you create the word deku. Defenseless Izuku. It's a perfect fit. It means useless. Katsuki called out, as he attacked the green-haired boy without any mercy. Ere the beatdown by Bakugo and his cronies, Izuku was on the ground, all alone, as the boy he defended had ran without telling anyone about what happened. Izuku stared at the sky as one thing came to his mind as he thought about what his mother told him just last night. Just because I am quirkless, doesn't mean that I am worthless. Izuku said, as he got up from the ground and licked his wounds for the day, hoping that the next one would be better for him, as an older Izuku speaks. That day I learned a very valuable lesson. Not all men and women are created equal. But that would be my first of many setbacks, but they wouldn't be the last. A few months had passed since Izuku had been beaten by Katsuki and his cronies, and Izuku had spent almost all of his time in training both his mind and body in order to prevent something like this from happening again. But that didn't stop the hurting feeling he felt when Katsuki called him Deku, a useless puppet for him to play with. But he would place that name in the back of his mind for now. He is looking for a way to make himself better as a fighter, but at the same time keep his mentality about saving people instead of fighting villains. He gained the idea of becoming an underground hero since he didn't wish for fame, he only wanted to see the smiles on their faces when he would save them from all harm. So he pulled out a notebook and started to write about the quirks of heroes and villains, writing about their strengths and weaknesses from what he could see from videos as well as being present in them. Over time he would fill out his first notebook with them, as he made sure to detail them as hero analysis for the future, and placing a number on them to let him remember how many he will make. He had just finished up in making an entire book for Katsuki's quirk, since he had the most experience in watching from afar as the boy used his quirk relentlessly. And this would continue for the next few years as he would use his mind in order to fight his battles as well as when they got physical. He used his training from his mentor in martial arts to defeat Katsuki on his own. It wasn't until a year later of dealing with the berating of Katsuki and his peers that Izuku's mind was starting to deteriorate fast. He would soon have no friends to hang out with, his confidence would be twiddled down to the point that it wasn't existent anymore, as he would start to mumble to himself. He became shy and introverted from his extroverted self as a child, and as he grew older the punishment from his peers became outright bullying as well as abuse. Katsuki would beat him on a regular basis as soon as Izuku was within his sight, and as soon as school was over, Izuku would go home with a new bruise on his body that was well placed by Katsuki. They weren't even 9 years old yet, and Izuku had gotten a bruise from his peers. Katsuki would continue to bring down the boy's confidence in himself as the years passed as well. He wasn't the only one doing this, as the teachers, as well as students of other schools, did the same. It was when Izuku was in his first year of junior high that his mental state was deteriorated to the point that he would stutter non-stop as he didn't know how to talk to people because of Bakugo. Because of that specific boy, Izuku's social life was non-existent, as Bakugo would tell everyone about his quirklessness as they would avoid him like the plague or join in on the bullying. Izuku would be beaten on a daily basis more now as a junior high school student, mainly because he would hide the burns as well as the broken bones in his body from his mother. He loves his mother so much, since she always took care of him as a kid. He never told her about what his peers at his school did because the school would call the police on them. They had tried many times over the years to get the bullying to stop, and when the police never helped them, Izuku just gave up asking for help from outside sources, as he just hid his wounds and went on with his day. He couldn't allow his mother to see his wounds. It would make him look weak in his eyes if she ever saw his condition. There were times when Izuku would show up to his training dojo with bruises as well as a broken arm, and would still train with his peers there. Although the mentor had tried to get him taken to a doctor, Izuku would outright deny anything about heading there, and let his arm heal whenever it was broken. But today was going to be different, since Izuku wouldn't know what was coming for him. Izuku was going through his school day as if it was normal, the occasional push and shove, loss of his lunchbox to bullies, the usual. But Katsuki had walked up to him and punched him in the gut, before dragging him to the courtyard as he openly beat him within an inch of his life, all because Izuku was in the same school as him. As soon as the beatdown was over with, Izuku was seen on the ground, with blood coming from his mouth as he coughed and wheezed in pain. Everyone who watched this happen they had decided to do nothing to Katsuki, as he would become a great hero in the future, and even recorded it so they could laugh at him. Katsuki had also gotten better at fighting, since Izuku would use fighting moves and techniques against the boy to defend himself. Katsuki would just take those moves to increase his fighting ability and use that against Izuku whenever he tried the defensive strike against him. It eventually got late to where Izuku entered his class late, and the teacher gave him detention, since that would allow Katsuki to continue his beating of Izuku air class. Izuku would walk to his desk, but not without his peers trying to trip him up and having him face plant the floor. Times like these, Izuku wishes he wasn't born in this world because of how these people looked at him, with disgust as well as hatred. Even his teachers would mark him down as dumber than the rest of the class, since he was quirkless and he wasn't allowed to be smarter than those with quirks. It was all of this, plus his peers, Katsuki's bullying and abuse, and the abuse and mental abuse he gained from the others, where he gained his anxiety. He was very scared of others, since they would never allow him to have a peaceful moment to himself without beating him down and reminding him of his place on the pecking order. Today though, Katsuki was extremely angry at the fact that Izuku was in the same school as him once more, and as soon as class was over, he pushed the boy over to the wall as he made a plan. "Well, Deku, it seems like there are some girls who actually like you. I hope you give them a good date," Katsuki said, as he burned Izuku's chest with his palm. Of course, Izuku never showed Katsuki the scars he gained from the boy, that would make him think that Izuku was not being truthful about his body being the way it was. By now Izuku had scars all over his body. The only places that didn't have scars on his body were around his groin as well as his rear. His face even had scars from the muzzles they would place on his face whenever he couldn't keep his muttering quiet enough to not disturb others. The next day Izuku would be waiting in a park for the girl who said that she wanted to date him, and admittedly the girl and him would have a lot of fun going to the mall, arcade, and finally heading to a small park where children would normally be at, but for some reason nobody was there. I really appreciate that you had fun with me," Izuku stuttered out, trying to be confident. "Ugh. Who would really wish to be on a date with your loser ass?" the girl said, a complete 180 from her nice and happy demeanor from the date. Didn't you have fun at least?" Izuku asked, confused. "Of course not. You really think that all the places you took me was fun? I personally would rank you as the worst date a girl would ever again," the girl called out angrily. Then, as if that wasn't good enough, her friends came over and with baseball bats, beat him down into the ground, unconscious of what was happening around himself. "There, at least you can die with dignity as a quirkless, worthless bastard of the Midoriya family," the girl said, as she walked away from Izuku's bleeding body. It was that day from then on, Izuku would gain a fear of women and never lower his guard around both men and women, since he couldn't trust any sex out there with his heart. We eventually reach present day. Izuku is walking to school, jittery as well as hunched in on himself, hiding the muscular body he gained from all the training he had during his time as a martial arts student. He had won many battles in tournaments, since he never had a use for a quirk, and would defeat students from other schools of martial arts without a quirk of his own to use. They even used quirks in their battles in the tournaments as well, and the only ones he would ever lose to were occasionally Ajiro Mashirao, and Kendo Itsuka. These two had become rivals of a sort for him since they never knew about his quirkless diagnosis, and he would keep it that way until he entered a hero school. He would watch as some people stood watching a rookie hero fighting a villain with a gigantification quirk. Oh my gosh! It's Kamui Woods, the new rookie hero out there on the block. Izuku called out, in sheer joy. He would take some notes on the hero as he would watch the fight. With his full attention, he really enjoyed his hobby of watching hero and villain fights since he gained experience of their quirks. As soon as the rookie hero was using his ultimate move to chain the villain in a bountiful amount of tree limbs, another hero came onto the scene quite literally kicking the villain in the face on her arrival. Really, Kamui? Woods asked, an incredulous look on his face. Hello everyone. My name is MT Lady. Nice to make your acquaintance, she said, giving all the reporting crews a great view of her ass. As Izuku made comments about her quirk as well as work ethic, a man with a star on top of his head looked over at Izuku as he heard the boy make his comments. Through mumbles. Hey. You looking to become a hero? He asked, as Izuku looked over at him. Yes. Of course. Izuku said, as the man said his next words. I look forward to your debut, he said, giving Izuku a thumbs up as Izuku blushed as well as noticed the time and ran to his school. As soon as he entered his classroom, the teacher lazily looked over at him and made a comment about his tardiness as Izuku apologized for being late. When he sat down for the class, the day went on as usual without much fanfare, although many of the other students took their time to bully Izuku during the reprieve of class. It was the final class for the day when the teacher came in with a bunch of papers in his arms. I know that you all are ready for the last few days of school, but you all need to finish your forms for high school, the teacher said, as he sat the papers on his podium as the students all collectively groaned in boredom. But I know that you all want to be heroes, the teacher called out, tossing the papers in the classroom as the class used their quirks except for two specific students. One Izuku Midoriya, and one Katsuki Bakugo. One for the reason that he is bullied for, and the other because he sees no reason to use his quirk when the extras could get him in trouble for it. Don't lump me in with these losers, teach. I am going to become the #1 hero without these bastards, Katsuki boasted as the class erupted in sneers. Ah. It seems like Katsuki is aiming for UA Academy. I bet you will make it to that specific school without much fanfare, the teacher mused as he pulled out another paper with Izuku's name and school he wishes to go to. When the teacher looked at the image of Izuku and the school next to it, the teacher sneered at it before he heard Katsuki talking about the mock tests as well as the fact that he aced them completely. Ah. It seems like Midoriya wants to go there as well, the teacher said, ousting Izuku to the peers of his students with a smug look on his face. And the look on Katsuki's face was sheer pricelessness for the man since he knew that he was poking the bear with the boy. He listened in on Katsuki berating Izuku for even trying to go into that school, And when they looked over the fact that he was training, they still bullied him since he never fought back. Since whenever he fought back against Katsuki, Izuku would be punished instead of Katsuki, since Katsuki would start the fight. Every single mark that should have been placed on Katsuki's profile was placed immediately on Izuku's, since the Quirkless reject couldn't even be close to human as of now. That was right, even ere 10 years Izuku was treated as if he was a mere animal, not even human. It was air class that day that the teacher let Izuku alone with his main bully as Katsuki talked to him. "Don't even think about going to you a nerd," Katsuki said, grabbing Izuku's notebook. "Hero analysis for the future, are you serious?" Midoriya, one of Katsuki's cronies, called out, laughing. Katsuki would grab the notebook and place it between his hands as he would blow it up, and then toss it out of the window. "Keep in mind of this moment, Deku. You will never become a hero, no matter what that bitch of a mother you have says. A quirkless, worthless bastard child like you will never become a hero. And should you enter UA with this threat, I will kill you myself," Katsuki said, as he burned a handprint on Izuku's shoulder through his Gakuren. As soon as the boy was leaving the room, Katsuki looked back as Izuku was nearly in tears. Before he spoke once more, "You know, there is a way for you to get a quirk," Katsuki said, watching Izuku's face become more hopeful. "You should just forfeit your own life and jump over the roof. Maybe then you might be useful in your next life, or maybe become a woman for me to fuck," Katsuki said, as he walked away laughing. As Katsuki left the room, Izuku was in the room tending to a new mental wound and physical wound for him to take care of. Leaving the building, he grumbled about Katsuki's new form of bullying being taken across a line that he would never wish upon his greatest enemy. "Really kickin' suicide baiting. What do you think would happen if I actually followed through with your advice?" Izuku grumbled, sad about how his friendship had ended years ago. He still wished for Katsuki to come up to him and say that it was all just a prank, and say that he was forced to do those things to him. But he knew better. Some part of his mind always told him that friends never act like that, but more importantly, he needed to clear his head. He had been clearing up a beach as strength training so that he could gain enough strength to pass the physical exam to become a hero student. He had even made a makeshift eskrima stick in order to fight with a chance of entering the school. He was walking under a bridge when he made comments about how he wouldn't let this push him further into his depression that he was feeling at the moment. Because of this shout, he never heard a sewer grate breaking from the ground at high speed as a sludge villain had appeared behind himself. It was only until a few moments later that Izuku heard the few words of the villain behind himself. "Oh, need a medium-sized meat suit." Izuku screamed. "All Might POV. I was having a great day today. I had a day off from work, and I could finally relax with my quirk's ability to lower my time frame as a pro hero. I was waiting for the moment I could get young Togata alone so I could talk to him and see if he was potentially a good fit for my quirk. But it seemed like the universe just wanted me to do some kind of work today." As a sludge villain appeared and stole a woman's purse and tried to get away. "Someone help! He stole my purse," the woman called out. Where are the heroes? Another civilian called out as I boot up. Do not fear. Why? Because I am here. I called out, as I smiled at the villain. Oh shit. All Might's here. I thought he was still in Tokyo. The villain called out, fearful. Release that purse. I call out, as the villain drops the purse and escapes into the sewer systems. Jumping down into the sewer system, I follow the stench of the villain through the winding turns of the sewers as I lose him in the winding tunnels. Damn it. I should have made sure to have enough time. I say, holding my LE hip. I walk around the next sewer grate when I hear the sound of trouble above ground. Shut up. I am so glad you walked around here. I needed a meat suit. The villain and hostage called out. I boot up once again as I jumped out of the sewer grate and revealed myself to the hostage and found a boy with green hair holding his breath. Do not fear. Why? Because I am here. I call out, winding up a Texas smash. Damn you all. Might. The villain screamed at me as he prepared a tentacle attack. Texas smash. I call out, blasting the villain into pieces around a small underpass. Catching the young boy in my arms, I place him on the grass and start to clean up the place before catching sight of a notebook on the ground. Collecting the villain up and placing him in one bottle of soda, I look at the notebook and read the contents. I am surprised that a boy like this had analysis like this. This is almost on par with most quirk specialists in the world. I so hope that this boy becomes an intelligence hero. He would do so much good. Walking over to the unconscious boy, I start to lightly smack his face to bring him back to the world of the living. Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! I say, trying to wake the boy up. Eventually he wakes up as he looked around his surroundings and saw me up close. All might? The boy called out, confused as well as curious. I apologize for getting you into my battle, young man. I can't believe that I nearly lost that villain in the sewers, so thank you for the help. I hope you become an intelligence hero with those analyses. They are almost on par with my dear friend. Although I must leave, heroes cannot stay in one place for long, for they fight villains and time. I say, jumping away. Izuku was walking home as he thought about what his favorite hero told him about his analyses. He never knew that there was an intelligence type hero out there. He only heard about limelight heroes as well as underground heroes. But he really wanted to be an underground hero. Though the less people know about his quirkless features, the better for him to have a calm and good life. He would walk all the way to the beach. As he started to clean it up more, he would always have a singular saying in his head when it came to how he viewed his days. Tomorrow is another day, Izuku. Tomorrow is another day, Izuku told himself as he continued his cleaning on the beach. Unknown to Izuku though, a blonde-haired skeleton of a man watched as the boy cleaned the beach on his own without anyone telling him to do so. I hope that young man brings the beach back to its original state, the man said, before leaving to head home. Izuku was cleaning the beach on Tokobo Municipal Beach Park. He had been cleaning it for the last few months that he had been training his muscular form was showing his strength as he lied cars, washing machines, drying machines, and many others to the road behind himself as he worked his best to complete his mission. He was also using this time to train by himself in combat that he learned from his dojo that his mother sent him to on certain days of the week. Today was supposed to be his O-day, but he wanted to clear the beach as soon as possible. He had also noticed how someone was watching him as he cleared the beach over the last few months. The man had a tuft of blonde hair that was eerily similar to All Might, but from what Izuku learned from his scouring on the internet, this man was Toshinori Yagi, the assistant of the #1 hero. He had taken to watching the boy as he cleared the beach without any kind of help nor goal seemingly in mind. But Izuku could care less about that, since he never had any friends. He never really had to worry about people coming over to his house in order to make sure that he kept himself distracted with them. He had been earning his figure all on his own as his mother made his dinners to allow him to grow and rip his muscles in order to get stronger. She had supported his dream of becoming a quirkless hero throughout his entire life since he was known as Quirkless. The teacher at his dojo had made sure that he learned everything he had to from him, although he was very discriminatory towards him because of his quirklessness. He wouldn't allow it to get to him though. His mind was strong and so was his body. He wouldn't let this slow him down since he had merely a few weeks until the entrance exams. He wouldn't slow down now when he has so little time for the exams. He was hauling a washer up the stairs when he saw the blonde-haired man standing nearby looking at the horizon. Are you all right, sir? Izuku asked, stuttering. No, young man, I am perfectly fine. Thank you for making sure that this beach is cleaned. It reminds me of my mentor in the past and holds a memory that I keep close to me about her. The man said, as Izuku nodded his head. A few hours had passed as Izuku was hauling the last bit of trash as well as machinery up to the road as he set it down near the road for the trash company to take away. He swiped the sweat off his forehead as he saw the blonde man leaving in the distance, shaking his head at the stranger danger part of his mind. He walked away. The man, however, had turned around just as fast as he followed Izuku all the way back to his home, never knowing that Izuku didn't know about his presence before entering his home's door. The blonde man looked at the exact door and nodded his head before leaving his mission of making sure that the kid was close to home completed. Izuku entered his home as his mother called out to him about dinner being done. He entered the kitchen and found his mother making his favorite dish, katsudon, as his mouth watered from the smell of it. He couldn't wait to eat some of it as he walked to the bathroom to take a shower and clear his mind. When entering the shower, he moved about the small space as the makeup that was well placed all over his body had washed away, showing many scars all over his body. Starburst-shaped burns in the form of old scars, cuts that were from someone slicing towards his body, bruises from earlier that day, not to mention the bruise on his ribs from the kick he sewered from Katsuki kicking him in the ribs that morning. Izuku rubbed his hand all over his ribs, and when it ran over his bruised ribs he hissed in pain as he slightly placed his hand to apply pressure on it. He was then sent into a coughing fit as he coughed up some blood as he let it go down the drain. Looking at how that pressure made him think of a broken bone, he finished his shower before placing bandages over his chest in order to hide the injury. His mother's job had stopped paying her what was required of a nurse in Musudafo General Hospital, and they couldn't afford to pay for a hospital bill nowadays. Especially since the doctors there were highly quirkist as well towards him, as they tried many times in the past to end his life whilst within their place of work. So Izuku had gained a distrust of authority figures ranging from heroes to police, to nurses, and doctors, and teachers and principals of his past. Since his experiences had never been kind to him, as well as those around him only wished for his apparent death, even his oldest friend, that he had wished so much to return to his side and help him become a hero. Nobody would care if a quirkless individual died out there, and Izuku couldn't leave his mother out there without him. That would be asking for her to demand why he had to die, and her to commit seppuku herself to be with her only son that she loved. From what he heard about his father from his mother, he had died in the States because of a villain attack, and his money could only get them so far. So they were on their own until either he died, or his mother died, and he would subsequently be placed on the streets or in a foster home that would try their damnedest to kill him before he was placed in a new home. He left the bathroom with some more makeup over his face as well as his arms and legs as he placed himself in shorts and a t-shirt. Entering the kitchen, he found his mother setting up the table as he entered the room and sat down at the table. "How was your day?" Izuku Inko would ask, as she placed his food in front of him. "It was good, better than usual. I managed to clear up most of the beach by now. I met someone new today though," Izuku said, as he ate his food. "Oh, who was it?" she would ask, eating some of her own food. "His name is Toshinori Yagi. I don't know why he was here in Musudafo when his main base is in Tokyo. So maybe All Might was nearby, and he was stationed near there and saw me cleaning up the beach," Izuku said, as Inko stared at him in awe. "Well, did he say anything to you?" Inko asked, curious. "He told me that he gives me his thanks for cleaning up the beach." It rekindled some memories he had about himself and his master from his past. "I don't know who his mentor is, but I bet they were a really great person," Izuku said, as he was nearing completion of his food. "Well, I hope that tomorrow gets even better, sweetie," Inko said, as she gave Izuku a hug. He returned the hug, air freezing for but a nanosecond. But as soon as he left the room and headed to bed, Inko stared at his retreated form and sighed to herself. Pulling out a piece of paper showing that he was kicked out of the dojo since his mother couldn't pay for more lessons for her son. "I just hope that he forgives me for not being capable to support him soon. He will soon be incapable of joining any more schools ere that. It seems like he will be on his own," Inko said, as she held her chest as it throbbed. She was then launched into a coughing fit as he placed her hands in front of her mouth to cover it from germs. Moving her hand away, she felt something wet in it as she looked down at it. Red blood as cold as can be in it. As she was in a cold sweat, she could only hope that Izuku forgives her for leaving him too soon. She had been diagnosed with cancer for the last few years, and she got that diagnosis without him knowing a single thing. So with her slowly dying and reaching old age, she knew that her time would come soon, and there was nothing she could do to stop Izuku from joining her in the air life ere her death. She could only hope that someone would be capable of watching him when she was gone. He was too kind to be all alone, he was too caring, compassionate, not to mention determined to make sure that nothing bad happened to her. But he was too late for the cancer that was attacking her from the inside out. She only wished that she could last long enough so Izuku could make his debut as an underground hero and bring smiles to the faces of the people he saves. It had been a week since Yagi had visited Izuku on the beach, and he had completed the beach now with only a few hours on the clock before his entrance exams for UA begins. He had just the beach in order to clean himself up and was near the front of the school of his dreams. Taking a deep breath in his nose, he walked through the gates as he walked with a small amount of pride. He didn't even make it 4 feet before Katsuki showed up screaming his name and shoving him to the ground as he walked by. Picking himself up, Izuku wiped the dirt as well as dust of himself as he walked forward again as he entered the school. He entered a small classroom in order to take the written exam. In order to make it into at least general education, he had questions that morally were for those who limelight heroes they were as asked about what a hero should do when a villain is still fighting for their cause. Izuku had placed down that he would talk them out of it before they would cause their own downfall, allow them to come forward to him without any more fighting. But there was another question that alternated from the previous that made him think about his previous answer. What would happen if a villain were about to kill someone, and you can't do anything to stop him besides the morally wrong decision to kill? Said villain. Izuku stared at this question for a long while. It had been the last question on the survey, and he was stumped on what to do. If a villain was to kill someone else, and the only way to stop them was killing them, what would he do? He would like to say that he would try to stop him before that could happen by sacrificing himself for the civilian. But there was a hidden meaning here. The real question was, would you kill a villain if they were too far gone in the mind? Would you kill a villain if they were mentally so far gone that they were a liability to those around himself herself? Izuku placed down the best answer he could come up with as he closed the notebook as he looked up only to find that there was other students still struggling on the test. He looked at the time and found that there was only a few minutes for the test to be over, and he turned in his test. The last thing we see on the paper was his answer on the test, the answer being, "No, I wouldn't kill the villain since they are only in need of help. I would sacrifice myself in order to save the civilian." Izuku was waiting in the auditorium as the students who completed the written exam slowly filed into the room waiting for the practical exam to start. Izuku had his eskrima sticks near him as he was looking at the booklet that he found underneath his seat and was reading the rules. As President Mike had started talking about the rules of the practical exam, Izuku mumbled quietly about what he needed to do in order to enter the school without being noticed by the other students. "And you?" The one who is muttering to themselves. "You are very distracting. If you wish to distract others with your little muttering, then you should leave." The person who called out to him. Izuku looked up and found most of the place laughing at him as he stared at the blue-haired individual who called him out to the audience. But before he could speak, President Mike told him about what the boy missed as well as went Into talking about a fourth robot that Izuku had already learned about in the notebook. Thinking up a strategy in order to get points, Izuku left the auditorium when Present Mike allowed them to leave. Sitting on his own, he never noticed how someone was looking at him as he focused on himself and his strategy in order to pass the exam. Standing before the area where his practical exam was taking place, Izuku started to stretch his limbs in order to make sure that he doesn't hurt them in the practical. He also took this time to look around the place to weigh his opponents who were vying for the same spot in the hero course. He saw the blue-haired young man staring at him with a silent anger, a brown bob-cut-haired girl calming her nerves down, and a very noticeable young man who had purple hair that was standing up on all ends, looking at his hands as if thinking about something important. It was here that Izuku finished stretching himself as he started to move closer to the front of the pack in order to get a head start on taking bots down. "Are you already present?" Mike called out from his position on top of the podium overlooking the potential students of the school. As soon as he got the nods of approval, he then started a countdown starting from 3.2 go. Present Mike called out, startling the students, as Izuku ran into the city. "Wow, trigger happy much," one of the prospects called out. "Wow, he really jumped the gun, he is so going to get disqualified," another would say, before the blue-haired boy and brown-haired girl had run in air Izuku. A few minutes into the exam, Izuku found himself standing in front of a group of bots that were foe villains, and he had beaten them down into rubble. He counted each and every one and managed to get up to 35 villain points total from the group alone. He had only defeated one robot at the start of the exam a few minutes ago because everyone took the ones he was going to destroy. He was lucky that he found some in the buildings near the center and that nobody was smart enough to check inside the buildings. Inside a dark room, a group of shadows watched over the screens, showing each and every battle arena where students and prospective hero hopefuls were fighting foe villains. "This batch seems like they are very fruitful this year," a woman said, licking her lips. "I know, right? We even have our first Quirkless applicant." Present Mike called out, entering the dark room. Everyone looked over at him as a squeaky voice chirped, gaining everyone's attention. "Midoriya Izuku, age 14, quirk. Status: Quirkless. Haha. He is very intelligent for being quirkless. He managed to pass 99% of the written exam just based on his personality alone on them. He seems to be very stoic based on his answers, but from what I see in his shaky handwriting style, he seems to be very anxious towards others on the cameras. From what I can see on his application to come here, he wishes to become an underground hero. Like you, Shouta," the squeaky voice called out, as the man named Shouta opened his black eyes to look at the screens at a green-haired boy. He was helping others who had gotten hurt as well as pulling out bandages to cover the cuts as well as bruises on others. "He seems to be smart at least, but how many points does he have total?" Shouta asked, curious. "It seems like he has 36 villain points alone. But from the heroic points he is standing at a max total of 75 points. He really seems like a heroic person, just have to iron out the anxious behavior," another man said, as he stared at the file. As they all looked at the screens, They noticed that the time was reaching the 2-minute mark for how much time was LE for the entrance exams. Well, let's give them a scare, why don't we? The squeaky voice called out, pushing a big red button. Back in the arena where Izuku was, he currently manhandling some bots that had surrounded the purple-haired examinee. Are you alright? Izuku called out, pulling the young man up. I'm fine. I had it handled. Why did you even try to help? He asked, using his quirk. We Izuku began before the boy had shoved him away, telling him to go and leave him alone. As soon as Izuku was out of earshot, the boy mentioned something about Quirkless bastard before he let his power drop of Izuku. It was here that Izuku shook his head as he gushed about the boy's quirk and all its applications before the ground started to rumble and shake. Looking around, the buildings near the center of the battlefield fell to the ground as examines had run in fear of something in the smoke. Izuku stared in awe of the monstrosity that stood before him. As some examines ran past him, the blue-haired boy had passed by him, but as he got close, time seemed to slow as he looked at Izuku. Before carrying on, shaking his head at the monster of a bot, Izuku turned to run away when he heard the sound of a girl in pain. Owie! Looking around the place, Izuku searched for the owner of the voice as she called out again. As someone help me! She called out. As soon as Izuku caught sight of her, he ran towards her location without any kind of thought processing, making it to the girl before the robot was upon them. Izuku pulled on the rubble that covered her leg as it moved just high enough for her to crawl out from underneath it. As soon as she was out of harm's way, Izuku looked at her and inspected her ankle as he wrapped some bandages around it solely. Looking behind himself, he noticed how the robot was nearing their locations very fast, and deciding to get punched by the girl later, he picked her up without any kind of warning, soliciting an eep from the girl as he ran away from the robot. As soon as they made it out of harm's way for the time being, Izuku placed her on the curb as he looked at her ankle again. He really wanted to make sure that she was fine, since he didn't have much medical knowledge about the human body. Does this hurt? Izuku asked, poking the girl's ankle. Ouch! She said, as she jerked her leg away from the prodding finger. Okay, so it might be a sprained ankle, or a broken ankle. But recovery girl should be capable of healing it too, where it won't hurt as much, Izuku said, in his little world in saving the girl. Time's up. Present, Mike called out, as it took Izuku out of his reverie. Wait, what? Izuku said, a little scared from the sudden voice calling out. Oh well, I guess that is the best I can do, huh? Izuku mumbled to himself as he fixed the girl's bandages enough to where they wouldn't fall. Oh, you will be alright. I got to head home now. I hope to see you here if I pass, Izuku said, standing up. The girl nodded her head as she waited for the school's nurse to arrive at the area. Once Izuku left the arena, the others were talking about how he saved the girl, and that he didn't get enough points to pass because of it. He was walking out the front gates of UA when he was grabbed from behind by a hand that was burning hot. As soon as he was pulled away from the grounds of UA, Izuku was tossed over to a wall and slumped to the ground. What did I tell you about joining UA, nerd? Katsuki called out, angrily. He had beat Izuku hard for a few minutes, leaving the poor boy on the ground and bleeding from his mouth, but he had a bone sticking out of his arm. Something that he couldn't hide from his mother. As soon as Katsuki Izuku there, the boy got up from the ground as he moved his arm to snap it back into place. As soon as that happened, Izuku used his jacket to use as a sling for his arm and limped back to his home to talk to his mother. Little did he know that the girl he had saved from the zero-pointer had seen the whole event happen and was nearly crying at how he had no reaction to snapping his arm back into place. She had hidden behind a trash bin in order to prevent herself from being seen by him, and she watched as he limped back to his home, and as soon as he disappeared from her view, she left for her home as well. She really needed to clear her head on what the hell just happened. Izuku woke up the next morning as he was mentally preparing for his first day at UA. 2 days ago he had gotten the letter of acceptance from the school of his dreams telling him that he made it into the school. With him having 35 villain points as well American Samoa 39 rescue points, he managed to get a total of 74 points. He was ecstatic as he found out that he was going to be in Class 1A, but he was literally walking through his home as he prepared to leave for his school. His mother waited in the kitchen for him as she gave him a lunch for him to eat at his school of choice. Please be safe, Izuku. I know that I haven't been all that supportive of your career choice in the past. But please just be sure that you don't die before me. Please, Inko asked. She asked him kindly. Izuku looked at her before nodding his head and giving her a hug, but as he was leaving, he looked back at her before saying one thing to her. I know that you worry about me, Mom, but you don't need to place all of it on me. You can use your worry to keep yourself in shape. I don't want to lose you yet, Izuku said, smiling at her. Inko watched as Izuku left the house as he walked down the road to the school where he would learn to become a hero for the next 3 years of his life. She let some tears come out as she focused on her problems of dealing with cancer, as she had only one thought to her son. I just hope that he can cope with me being gone in the next year or two. Izuku walked through the halls of UA as he was slowly making his way to the class where he would study being a hero for the next 3 years. He made it to the classroom as he heard some commotion inside, as only 2 thoughts came to mind. I really wish that Kaken wasn't in this classroom. But at the same time, I hope that I can at least make some friends. Opening the door, he was greeted by Katsuki sitting on his desk, with his feet on the top of it, whilst another student, the one who called him out during the practical event of the exams, if he remembered correctly, he was admonishing Katsuki about the disrespect he was giving the previous owners of the seat. Sighing with great resignation, Izuku walked over to his seat without garnering the attention of both boys as he successfully hid his presence from the rest of his classmates in order to get some semblance of peace. But it seemed like the world couldn't give him his peace, because as soon as he sat down, the navy-haired boy noticed his presence in the seat behind Katsuki and went to introduce himself. Hello there, I am Izuku, and I come from a private academy, Izuku said, bowing at a complete 90 angle. Izuku looked over at the boy before giving him a nod and handing a piece of paper to him, giving his name as well as asking him to lower his tone kindly. I see, Thank you for informing me about the loudness. I will see to it at once that I am quieter. Itza said, walking away, and that was when Katsuki muttered to Izuku without anyone listening to him. Why the hell are you here, Deku? I thought I told you to kill yourself. Katsuki grumbled to Izuku. Well, I made it in, so can you at least leave me alone? Izuku asked, as Katsuki gave a grunt in response before placing his hand on Izuku's leg and activating his quirk and burning through the cloth and making a burn mark on his leg. At this point Izuku didn't react, as he just sighed solely as the burning sensation had made his mind remember that he was alive. It wasn't long until the last student arrived in the classroom as she walked in and saw Izuku grimacing solely, and she smiled happily, making her way over to him. Hi. You're the curly-haired boy that saved me, she said as she got his attention. You're the girl who threw up rainbows, Izuku mumbled to himself. Unfortunately, the girl heard him as she pouted at his remembrance of her as he reiterated his answer to her. My name is Midoriya Izuku. Izuku introduced himself as he cursed his stuttering in his mind. My name is Uraraka Okako. It's nice to meet you, she said, as Izuku noticed something on the ground near the entrance of the room. Tapping her shoulder, he gave her a look, telling her to stop and head to her seat as he pointed out the caterpillar on the ground. Nodding her head, she moved away from him as she sat down in her seat that was unfortunately on the other side of the room from Izuku. Shota Izawa was many things, but impressed was one thing that many failed to do on the first day of school. So imagine his surprise when the most timid of his class of students learning under him noticed his presence first and told another classmate to sit down. That's one mark on his mind for a very observant person in his class. Good, at least one of them noticed my presence before I even entered the classroom. The others, on the other hand, Izawa thought to himself before speaking out. If you're here to make friends, then you should just leave, he said, as he entered the classroom drinking a jelly pouch. Standing up from his sleeping bag that was yellow in color, he stood in front of his new class of students that he was thinking would have to expel at some point. He began to tell the class what his intentions were. You're here to learn to become a hero, not have fun and games. You will die if you are like that. On the field, put these on and head outside. We're having a quirk apprehension test, Shota said, before leaving the classroom. Sitting in one of the seats outside the classroom, he noticed a bunch of noise coming from the room as three figures come out. One of them was the first to notice his presence, and the other two was a brown-haired student with a navy blue-haired boy. If he remembered correctly, the navy-haired boy was Itza Tensei's little brother, but the other two he thought would be good friends for the Itza's second son. Moving outside, he waited for exactly 5 minutes for everyone to come outside and was genuinely surprised when Izuku came out in exactly 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That was concerning if he was the first to come out before the rest of his class. From what he looked at in his file, Midoriya was very aggressive, as well as started fights. But if there was anything Shota knew about first appearances, it was that his gut immediately told him something was wrong with what he was seeing. Midoriya, in his eyes, was very skittish, timid, and was very observant. Not only that, but he was looking around as if he was trying to find any and all exits for him to take as soon as possible if something bad happens. Ignoring it for now. He knew that Izuku was quirkless, but he wanted to see how a quirkless individual could do compared to his peers with his less than stellar training. He knew how to fight, as well as run, but could he stand alone next to his peers even with their quirks? As the rest of his students came out of the changing rooms, Shota had to suppress a sigh of anger as they had arrived at least 4 minutes later than Midoriya did. 6 minutes, you're getting better. But needs work. Now that all of you are here, do you all know what the quirk apprehension test means? Izuku asked, as he stared at the students. None of them had risen their hands except for Izuku, who had been hiding in the back trying to not be noticed. Midoriya, what do you know about the quirk apprehension test? Izuku asked, as Izuku stood before him trembling. I believe that it was you used to test the Q quirks of others in order to get the best number of how good they are at you using their Chu quirks. Izuku said, looking at the ground. Izuku looked at Izuku for a second before nodding his head, as he looked at the other students in the area. He spoke. What Midoriya has said is true. I am here to make sure that you all know how to use your quirks without troubles, as well as measure how well your potential for heroism is. Just to let you all know, only one of you will not be tested on this method and will be given the standardized tests. The way the old school system does these tests is completely wrong and illogical. You will use your quirks on these tests to see how well you do, and if you manage to get an even better score, then I will deem you worthy of being in this school. Izuku said, as Eureka spoke up. What about the orientation? She asked, incredulously. Real heroes don't have time for speeches about how to make the principal's fur look as shiny as it does on a regular basis. Plus ultra and all that. Bakugo, you scored the highest on the entrance exams physical part. How far could you throw a sobel in junior high? Izuku asked. Bakugo. 73 meters. Katsuki said, grinning. Use your quirk this time, and make sure that you don't hold back. Izuku said, as Bakugo entered the circle as he grinned savagely. I will just add a small explosion to show these extras who they're dealing with. Katsuki thought to himself before getting into a pitcher's stance. As soon as his hand was at a 45 angle, his hand exploded with massive power as the ball was sent far into the distance. Izuku pulled up his phone as it showed Bakugo's score, and it was well over 700 meters, in fact it was exactly 750.2 meters. Wow! 750 meters. That's insane. Wow, I can't wait to use our quirks. This is going to be so much fun. All of Izuku's classmates called out, ending with a pink-skinned girl calling the last part out. Fun you say? Izuku asked, as his eyes started to glow red. Well, if it's all fun and games to all of you, then whoever gets last place in these tests will be hereby expelled and will be blacklisted from all hero schools for 3 years. Izuku said, before watching his students look at him in shock. But the one he was paying attention to the most was Izuku's. He was saddened by how resigned he was to be expelled from UA. That's not fair. We just got in here. Eureka called out, trying to make a defense. Not fair, would you say that when you have to stop natural disasters, villain attacks, and many more? No, well. Then it is a hero's job to make everything that isn't fair, fair in all terms of the word. Plus ultra and stu, but you need to know that the world will not wait for you all to become the heroes that you need to be. Now, get moving, Izuku said, as some students lined up at the 50-meter dash. First up was Azui Tsuyu and Itza Tinya. They started well with Azui jumping across the 50 meters, whilst Itza ran it. Itza got 3.03 seconds, whilst Azui had managed to escape with 4.40 seconds. Everyone else got a range between 5 to 8 seconds respectively, and Izuku was finally up against Katsuki as if the world hated him even more than he hated himself. He still thought about what Katsuki had told him about a year ago when he was in his final year of junior high. As the buzzer went Izuku ran as hard as he could while making himself as aerodynamic as possible and getting a score of 4.59 seconds. Way better than his junior high school record of 9 full seconds. The next test was the long jump, as everyone managed to jump past it except for Mineta, and he couldn't use his quirk to help out at all. Izuku managed to get near the edge of the sand pit here but was tripped up midair by Katsuki calling him a nerd. Katsuki got reprimanded by Izuku, telling him that if he makes Izuku mess up he will be expelled without reason. Next that test was the grip test, and Izuku was 4th place here with a grip strength of 199 kilos, with the winner of this one being Shoji Mizo, as he got a point amount of over 500 kilos. Next was the long run, as Izuku was running and keeping up with Itza as he was in 4th gear and was lapping him many times. It was surprising that Izuku was able to keep up with everyone else in terms of stamina compared to others, as Katsuki, Eureka, Kirishima, Ashido, Hagakure, Jiro, Ajiro, Siro, and a few others had tapped out within a few minutes. The only ones LE was Izuku, Tinya, Momo, and Shoto. Once that was done, up next was the seated toe touch, as Hagakure and Ashido had dominated this test as they were incredibly flexible, and Izuku managed to get 4th here as well, surprising most of his classmates with how flexible he was. This was the sit-ups and push-ups, as Izuku dominated this with Katsuki here. The only one who could keep up with them was Kirishima, and he tapped out as soon as Katsuki did. As soon as the tests were over, Izuku pulled everyone over to see how they did. Alright, these are the results. I won't tell you each individual answer, so I will just show the rankings to all of you, Izuku said, showing them the rankings. That is all of your rankings. Do be discouraged, as that will not only be the start of your starting line, but how you will rank your future selves. Izuku said, as Izuku looked at his ranking. 6th, Izuku thought to himself. I could have sworn that I did worse than the others though. Izuku thought to himself. No. A wail was heard, as it was revealed to be Mineta Minoru. I can't be expelled now. I haven't even gotten to touch Momo's breasts yet. Mineta called out in sadness. All of the girls had become more cautious of him as they shuddered tremendously as Izuku moved over to the boy without even thinking about it, as he slapped the boy in the face. Get a hold of yourself, Heroes don't become what they are just to touch women. They protect people as well as the innocent. Izuku said, placing his hands on the crying boy's shoulders. If you really wanted to be a hero, you should only do it to rescue people as well as bring smiles to their faces. Not to be able to make a relationship with them. Izuku chastised as Izawa wrapped him up in his capture gear. I was going to say that there was no one being expelled, but if you think that you can smack another student without any reason, you better give me one now. Izawa said, staring at Izuku, with his eyes glaring at Izuku. Sir, Mineta-san had made suggestive comments about the girls throughout the tests. Not only that, but he made a specific comment about Yayorozu-san's breasts and how he wanted to cop a feel of her chest. Izuku said, as the teacher had stared hard at Izuku's big expressive eyes. Anything else I should be made aware about, he asked, as Izuku mentioned about how there was a hole in the men's changing room linking their changing rooms between the men's and women's. Izawa just sighed in anger as well as disappointment at Mineta. Izuku really wasn't helping the boy's case. When it came to the boy's perversion, that was when Mineta had spoken up. That is a lie. He was talking about looking at the girls from the men's changing room. He stated that he found the hole and told us to look. Mineta said, before Izuku looked at him with an angered expression. I was on the other side of the changing room. I would never look at a woman like that, much less the girls in our class. They may be beautiful no matter how they look, but that doesn't mean you can just look at them, Mineta-san. Izuku said, looking downright furious at the moment. Why are you saying that I did it? I wasn't even near the hole. Mineta called out, before Izuku pulled out a phone that recorded everything. Showing it to Izawa, the man looked at Mineta and grabbed him with his capture weapon. Midoriya, you will have detention for attacking another student. As for Mineta, you will be heading to the principal's office about your lies as well as your behavior towards your female classmates. Izawa said, dragging the boy away. The lesson plans as well as the syllabi are inside the classroom, make sure to read and memorize them. I will not make more of them. Izawa said, disappearing in the darkness of the tunnel. As soon as they all changed into their clothes for school, Izuku made to grab all of his things as he left the school before anyone could see him. He was walking near an alleyway when he was punched from behind the head, sending him to the ground swimming in his mind. So the useless Deku thinks he can enter my school, and make sure that he can be better than his peers, Katsuki growled out, as he walked over to the downed Izuku. The boy was just getting up when an explosion hit the boy's back as Izuku grunted in slight pain. I will make sure that you regret coming to UA without my permission. Katsuki called out again as he pelted Izuku's back with explosions. When he left Izuku there, the boy was edging on unconsciousness as he tried to get up off the ground. Once he got up from the ground, he made to move to the road when he noticed that his left arm wasn't responding to his beck and call. Looking down, all he could see was blood on his sleeve, and as soon as he got a closer look at it, he saw that it was burned all the way to the muscle underneath his skin. Shaking his head in slight resignation, he walked all the way back to his home and made sure his mother wasn't around in Order to clean up his body. Air taking a shower that burned a lot on his body, Izuku replaced his arm with some bandages that had burn cream on them as well as a healing agent in order to keep him from getting an infection. He would go to sleep that night unaware that his mother was staring at him as he left the bathroom in shock. Once he was asleep, his mother entered the bathroom and found that the bathtub was filled with blood on the rims of it as she decided to clean it up. She wouldn't ask him about what happened that day if he didn't want to talk about it. He had clammed up about his school experience when he was a kid to prevent her from worrying about him. He was probably doing that now. So she had to be the good mother and keep him safe in his home, as well as make sure that his home was a safe haven from everything else in the world. If his home where he grew up was a safe haven, then god damn it she will make it as safe as the Pentagon in the United States. The next morning was very hard for Izuku, as he was having trouble getting out of bed. As soon as he managed to get out of bed, he walked over to the kitchen to get some breakfast in him from his mother as she gave him his lunch for the day. Walking to the school was great as it was silent without anyone telling him where he should go as well as why he shouldn't exist. Overall, the day was fine once he entered his classroom and ignored the surprised looks he had when he sat down. The only one who expressed concern for him was Eureka as she noticed the bandaged hand on his hand and asked him about it. "Are you okay?" Midoriya, Eureka asked, concerned. "I'm fine. Jay just accidentally cut my hand making dinner yesterday," Izuku said, as he looked away from Eureka. Class soon started as Mineta had entered the room, but not before spitting on his shoe and sitting in his seat, making the day go by faster. The classes seemed to be normal as there was math, science, art, history, as well as English. It was now time for the last class of the day as everyone was wondering what the teacher for the class would be. It wouldn't be long before Izuku heard the telltale footsteps of All Might. Making his presence known as Izuku revealed a smile for the first time at the school. "I am coming through the door like a normal person," All Might called out, sticking most of his body through the door in his Silver Age costume. The class went ballistic on his entrance. As Izuku had started to mumble to himself about how cool of a person All Might was in person. "The man may have crushed my dreams a year ago, but he is still the coolest person in the world," Izuku would think to himself, as he gained a sad smile on his face. "For today's class, we will be doing combat training," All Might called out, as he pulled a card for combat out. "Battle training?" Katsuki growled savagely. "Although that is what we will be doing for this class, a hero is nothing without their hero costumes," All Might said, as he prepared to head over to the gym beta. "Now get these on and head over to gym beta," All Might called out before leaving. As Izuku walked over to the locker rooms, he changed his clothes as fast as he could and managed to look at his hero costume. It was dark green, with white lines going down the legs of it. It had a red plus sign on the side of the mask as well as a lower mask covering his mouth and nose. It had mechanisms that prepared him for gas attacks from villains, and the suit itself was massively fire and water resistant, as well as strike and cut resistant. He even had some Kevlar on the suit itself to prevent it from being blasted from guns from a distance. The massive Kevlar suit had been made to make sure that Izuku could defend himself from massive caliber bullets that could hit him from far distances. His mask gave him a unique look as it did most of his face and made his eyes look black in the sclera, and his emerald eyes would glow through the darkness. He even had some tentacles coming out the back of his costume to make it scarier, but the one item on his person that gave everyone a pause was the eskrima sticks as well as the bow sta on his back. He walked into the gym as he saw All Might staring at him with a small amount of shock before he walked over to Izuku. This might be the only time I can say this, young man, but I want to apologize for my wording on that rup. All Might said, solely as Izuku looked into his eyes. I have no reason to give you for why I was that harsh against you that day. I don't expect you to forgive me answer for you, but I just want to let you know that you can be a hero without a quirk. What part of the profession are you searching for? All Might asked. I decided to become an underground hero. I can make people smile when all my classmates are asleep during the night, and make sure that the villains in the night are taken care of. And about the apology, I already forgave you a few months ago. I never could tell you how I felt that day because of the fact that I was still going through the emotions of being told no. But I could see it from your perspective. All Might-san, you were just trying to make sure that I don't go out to fight a villain without taking the full blame for it. I have always wanted to become a hero, so you telling me no, just made me train all that much harder to make sure that I couldn't become what you feared. Izuku said, reassuring the hero. Well, I will tell you right now. You are doing a great job at that. All Might said, ruling Izuku's hair. It was here that the rest of the class decided to arrive as Izuku sat on the ground next to the number 1 hero and pulled out a notebook and started writing in it. They say the look makes the hero. All of you look so cool. All Might said, gushing at the students. Wow. Midoriya, you look so cool. Eureka said, as Izuku looked up at her. From her perspective it made him look more intimidating as well as for some reason she could see pain as well as embarrassment in his eyes. Thanks you Eureka-san, you look cute as well. Izuku said, looking away. I know, I gave them my specifications, but they made my suit skin tight. Eureka said, as she twirled around in front of him. As the class watched from afar, they could see the makings of a relationship building between the two since they were too adorable with one another. All Might told them all the idea of the lesson was that villains had created a bomb inside a building, and it was the hero's job to stop them from attaining their goal. There would be 2 teams of 2, and that would represent the teams of heroes and villains. They chose at random since that would make it seem similar to a situation on the field. And nobody would know if they would get the perfect set of quirks or minds in the same area on the battlefield. Team A, Bakugo Katsuki and Itza Tinya. Team B, Aoyama Yuga and Ashido Mina. Team C, Midoriya Izuku and Eureka Okako. Team D, Yayorozu Momo and Mineta Minoru. Team E, Todoroki Shoto and Mizo Shoji. Team F, Ajiro Mashirao and Hagakure Toru. Team G, Jiro Kuka and Kaminari Denki. Team H, Tokoyami Fumikage and Azui Tsuyu. Team I, Hanta Siro and Kiris Hima Ajiro. Team J, Rikido Sato and Koji Koda. That is the teams for this exercise. Ha ha ha. Now then for the first battle training. Team A as the heroes. And Team C as the villains. All Might called out, as Izuku gulped hard. For as he turned around to look at who Team A was, Katsuki was staring right at him with an expression that was way too scary for him to realize was toned down. The face he was looking at was the face of the boy who was allowed to do whatever he wanted to him without getting in trouble for it. Izuku looked at Yurika as he told her to follow him. He couldn't breathe properly since he needed to stay out of sight for Bakugo. Arriving in a room inside the building, Izuku looked at Yurika as she stared at him in worry. Bakugo is someone who doesn't really like me. We used to be friends, but he lost that privilege when we were 4. But I have a plan. All Might said that we didn't need to keep the bomb in the same building, so I will place it inside the building across from us behind our position. Then all we need to do is keep Bakugo and Itsu-san busy enough to run the time. Izuku said, as Yurika nodded her head. It was a foolproof strategy, and Izuku had plans in order to keep Bakugo running him and Yurika. He just wishes that they could be friends once more like they used to be when they were 3. Hero battle. Training begin. All Might called out. Bakugo and Itsu were standing outside the building as they made to enter the front door in order to start the battle trial. All Might had just stated that they could begin the exercise and Bakugo was immediately in order to find the quirkless bastard who somehow cheated his way into UA. That quirkless bastard thinks that he can enter my school and get away with it. I will not allow this to continue. That quirkless DEKU is dead. Bakugo thought to himself as he blasted himself up to the higher floors searching for Izuku. Itsu was running up the other set of stairs as he heard explosive sounds coming from the 3rd floor. Bakugo-kun is really loud. We are supposed to be the device that would end the exercise. I need to keep my mind on the prize, Itsu said, as he ran through the building searching the doors. It wasn't long ere Bakugo le that he had ran into Izuku re-entering the building as they crossed paths. So there you are, Deku. Were you hiding outside from me? Bakugo said, as he initiated his quirk to release small sparks, unconsciously filling his support gear with nitroglycerin sweat inside. I wasn't hiding, Kaken. I was doing something for the exercise, but if you want to settle a grudge match, far be it from me to allow it to happen, Izuku said, getting into a battle stance. Yurika is in the building behind me, and from where she is at, I can see her hiding the bomb under a tarp. That will be extremely useful since Itsu will overlook it at first as something miscellaneous. I need to direct Kaken away from her, Izuku thought as he ran down the hallway as Bakugo followed in pursuit. About a minute later, Yurika had entered the open window, just in time to see Itsu enter the room in search of the bomb. Villain! I have come here to end your evil ways, Itsu said, dramatically. Snored. Itsu-san. That is so hilarious. But I have to prevent Snicker you from getting to the bomb. she said, snickering and laughing at Itsu's heroic persona. Izuku ran down a hallway as he dodged explosion, the boy behind him getting more and more angry and sweaty at the same time as time passed by. Stop running, Deku. Stop running and face me. Are you a coward? Katsuki screamed behind Izuku. Nope. I am just keeping you away from the bomb, Izuku said, moving into a room with a lot of room. You just locked yourself in here with me, Katsuki said, growling happily. Yeah, in order to keep you away from Uraraka-san. I have to keep you distracted. You won't be capable of finding the bomb since it is on the other side of the gym area, Izuku said, confidently. Bakugo looked at Izuku in shock before shaking his head as he launched an attack. I don't care about that thing. I am here to do one thing. And that is show you your place underneath my boot. Katsuki screamed as he threw his famous right hook towards Izuku. Using his martial arts lessons that were ingrained into his brain, Izuku dodged to the LE of the attack, and grabbed the ending arm before he kicked Bakugo in the gut, sending the boy to the ground fast. As Bakugo landed on the ground, Izuku wasted no time in jumping on top of Bakugo as he prepared some capture tape and placed it over Katsuki's gauntlet, but just as he was about to fasten it, Bakugo blasted his back, sending him into the door of the room, knocking it its hinges. Crawling away in the hall, Izuku managed to use the wall to stand up. His back was sporting some new burns that had lacerations on top. That's going to leave a new mark, Izuku said aloud. As he turned down to the doorway of the room he had Bakugo inside, the said boy entered the hallway as he found that it was a clear dead end. Ding! Both Bakugo and Izuku looked at the gauntlet in shock as Bakugo gained a battle-ready smirk that promised pain. Back in the room on the second floor, Itsu was flying towards Okako as she dodged his aerial kicks that were nearly fast enough to put her out of commission. She used some of the broken material that were taken from her surroundings as she created a shield around her body, as she remembered how to create an orbit of rocks around herself. I personally think that you can focus on the area where they can float around you. They don't have to be behind you, they could be in any position. You just have to control the atoms around them in order to move them around you. Make sure that they are moving around the same speed as All Might when he is running. That way you can catch Itsu-san. Oh guard, Izuku said to her in her memory. As the rocks surrounding her moved about her body, she was ecstatic that her idea of using some of her energy in order to move the objects around her like a small orbit ring. Thank you, Izuku, for telling me that, she thought to herself as she ran over to Itsu. The boy was moving towards her. Immediately as his speed increased in the small room they were in, Okako had managed to move some of her rocks towards Itsu as he ran forward, and some managed to stun him for mere moments before he continued his sprint towards her. Once he was within striking distance from her, she jumped in the air just as he did, surprise him as she grabbed his body with all 5 of her fingers as she took his gravity away from him. As he floated aimlessly in the air, he used his speed in order to launch himself at her once more, but there was a slight issue. He didn't have any brakes as he slammed into the wall next to him from his generated speed in the air. Using this to her advantage, Okako moved towards the door as Itza managed to get used to being in the air. Running along the walls, he ran in her direction as he used the terrain in order to make his journey a lot smaller. Entering the hallway moments ere she did, he ran along the walls in order to catch her by surprise. Only when he heard the release word come from her mouth he felt all his weight return, but he continued on running in order to catch her. He launched another kick towards her and managed to land a powerful kick to her gut, sending her down the hall. As she laid on her chest, she tried to crawl away in order to get away from him when he pulled out some plastic tape and wrapped it around her hands. Young Eureka has been captured. All Might called out in the intercom. Before I leave, do you think you can tell me where the bomb is? Itza asked, as Eureka laughed at him. I wouldn't want to spoil the fun. But it is on the other side of the gym training facility. You'd never find it in time. Don't even think about checking in the buildings behind us, is it? Wouldn't even be there. Okako said, as she initiated the plan that Izuku told. As Itza gained a look of shock, we return to the main room, where the class and All Might are waiting inside of. What the hell? Why would she reveal that information? Kaminari asked, incredulously. She just gave away the location of the bomb. Momo called out, a little confused. She really is bad at being a villain. Mineta said, leering at Momo's chest. Actually, she placed it inside the building behind the training one. The rules never stated where you had to place the bomb. All Might said, smiling. As the class watched the battle in rapt attention, they all looked at the location where Izuku and Katsuki were fighting. They were disgusted by what they were seeing though.